Good morning and welcome to Deep Dives with New Perspectives. I'm Michael Bartlett,
And I'm Merrylin LeBlanc.
and we're looking at this very interesting thing of the last few months we've had this real kind of focus in the signs, right? For a while it was like Capricorn had like all the planets in it. It was like a big football team hanging out in Capricorn, and then everyone's all up in Aquarius and Pisces, all the way up to a little bit almost into Taurus a little bit, with Uranus. And so we've got like this scorpionic bowl created, right, between Pluto and Mars, holding all the planets captive.
Ooh, yeah. And interesting because of you mentioned Pluto and Mars, because it's sort of like there's the individual kind of leading in terms of the way they move in a chart. And yet the collective is coming up from behind. And I have this image of the individual scrambling to go, wait a minute, I'm not part of the herd necessarily. I'm my own person. And yet, I seem to be contained in my own environment. I can't go explore. What's going on here? It's somehow or other that Lord of the underworld is suppressing us, keeping us down.
And Mars and Taurus, right? I mean, it's not really, it doesn't, Mars and Taurus is kind of like, that's when, Mars is more interested in hanging out with his lovers and having some chocolate, not worried about saving the world right now, although he just was hanging
But you
out
know
with.
what? Because you're talking to Mars and Taurus here.
Good.
That I can go with having some chocolate ice, or not just chocolate, but even I love vanilla.
Great
Uh,
food,
eh,
any great food.
yeah,
Yeah.
anything sweet, and it's like been the hardest thing being isolated at home, and I have gotten every kind of alternative sweetener that you can name. I go shopping and I go to the health food stores and I go to the section where all the sweets are. I mean, they're good. There's at least a dozen alternative sweeteners, no calories.
But it fools your body, they say. It fools your body into thinking it needs it, and so supposedly it craves more. But I don't know
It
about you,
keeps
but
that
it's
craving.
Girl Scout cookie season, and I bought 4 boxes of the Thin Mints, which are so bad because of the palm oil and everything. And I will eat one whole tube. I can eat a box like in one sitting.
And so we can blame this all on Mars and Taurus.
Well, I do
Except
have Jupiter there, so I understand.
Well, what's interesting, I was going to say Mars is, at a point right now where it's spending about a month in a sign, but we just can't, at the end of last year, from like spring of last year into fall, Mars was retrograde in Aries. And so it was there for months, and that's what happens in its retrograde phase. So we can't blame it all on Taurus.
And it's also, I mean, it's at what we call the aneretic degree, right? Or the master degree, 29 degrees. I have a 29 degree well, I actually have a little 28 degree Virgo Mars. And you know, it's really interesting. I think of like the aneretic degree, those late degrees, as being kind of this synthesizing part of understanding the range, right? Of like what the experience is of that planet through that whole sign.
Yeah, that's probably true. I have Neptune there.
Nice.
And so we have a Mars Neptune conjunction. And that's probably why we like to energetically dip in to the psychic realm, the realm of metaphysics that goes beyond the physical world. This is very Neptunian. And what are the connections, what's really going on beneath, outside of what we're dealing with here. And yeah, so there is something about, matter of fact, I don't have it at that degree, but I also have the North Node in Virgo and these are in my 12th house. So there is like no boundary. So what I have discovered through, so I don't know whether it's Neptune or the North Node that's doing this pursuit, but I have pursued practically everything that's associated with the 12th house throughout my life. Practically, not
You haven't been
20%.
incarcerated though, have you?
No, but I have
But you were
visited,
in a
but
you were like in a like a cloister
I
though.
was in the convent.
Right. So
Yes,
that
yes,
actually,
it's cloistered, but that's pretty much the same in
I
some way,
agree.
except you voluntarily go there. The other thing though, I have visited people in prison, so it's sort of like, and actually, I remember, and this is when I was a nun. One of the other nuns' cousin was incarcerated, and she asked if I would go with her to this prison in one of the major prisons in California to visit. And that was my first experience in a prison, in the visiting realm. And it's kind of strange. And then later I was dating a lawyer who had clients in prison in San Quentin. So I have been there as well. and, and so, prisons, I hopefully will never experience being imprisoned in that way. Um, but what's interesting, there's another part of me, and it's funny because I had a conversation with somebody yesterday about this, about, one of the joys I've had as an astrologer over the years is I had the experience of teaching teenagers astrology and really enjoyed it. And I thought, what about teaching in a juvenile, what do they call them? The
Center.
detention center.
Right.
And so this is something I'm going to look into. So
Good.
there is this, and this is where, going back to what we're talking about in terms of um, uh, the energy at the last degree of Virgo, and exploring the realm where that is in our charts. And for me, that has a lot to do with the 12th house. That's how we got into prisons and stuff, as well as Neptune covers all of our institutions. The institution of education, the institution of justice, and
The
what do they
institution
call
of being embodied and not being embodied.
exactly?
I mean, I have a 12th house moon and my Neptune's there too. And also I have a 29-degree Scorpio moon. And yeah, I think there's just something to me, especially with the Scorpio thing in the 12th house, to me, it's very Persephone-like. It's like the I don't, and you and I both have a balsamic moon, I mean, a third quarter moon, so it's the we don't know that we don't know. And it's this like, Persephone going like, oh, here's a pretty flower, and oh, here's another pretty flower, and it's a gorgeous day. And then, whoosh, Pluto grabs us and takes us down into the underworld and says,
How did I
there's
get in this
another
mess?
experience to be had. I'm sorry?
I said, yes. How did we get in this mess?
Right. But then the thing is it's this interesting thing of where it calls upon this deeper understanding. So right now, in relationship to that moon Pluto, I mean, that Mars Pluto is the moon acting, as an inconjunct with the Mars and going to be slow, going to actually, it's in a wide sextile at this point with Capricorn, I mean, with the Pluto. So it's playing this wonderful little in-between dance of, and it's, I don't know, like for some reason I've been really thinking about the inconjunct energy and in two signs that kind of don't fall. Inconjunct energy I think of as being something that requires an adjustment, but we don't really quite know how to do it. It's a relationship that is not that isn't based in element or in modality. It's not, they don't share the same modality, they don't share the same element, they don't share supportive. It's not like water to fire or earth to water, those kind of things. So it's this very interesting thing that kind of makes us have to go like, darn it, what it's like, I don't know, like, when you wear that shoe that has that needs that repair, but you kind of put up with it for a while until you just can't put up with it anymore. But something about the Scorpio Gemini that can adjust so well to things, and Scorpio that just wants to get to the root of anything at all costs. I mean, I've even heard of relationships, it's like one of those things that you wouldn't think that would be like good for like husband, wife, or partnering like in love relationship to be, Gemini, Scorpio. But when you think about it, it's like they kind of move each other along in an interesting way, right?
They do. They do. Um, You're making me think about my moon Jupiter, which aren't quite in, they've already, they aren't, they've left the inconjunct and are heading towards a conjunction, but I guess by orb, they would still be, that would be the major.
Or by sign, are they in conjunct?
Yes, by sign,
Yeah,
the Scorpio Gemini. Yes. Yes.
I think that
And
qualifies.
what's interesting in that dynamic
Yeah.
has to do with, in my from where I deal with that energy is from a level of consciousness
Mm.
that the lunar consciousness for me has taken me into, um, well, in some ways, what we might call the magical realms of Neptune. And the Jupiterian consciousness has taken me into more of the academic realm of knowledge. But both of them contribute. So it's because it's not like, you know, I have some insight, but I don't I ponder it. This is more the Neptunian thing. I don't say, well, this is the actual reality. It's like watching films, like watching movies, and reminding me of my mother who watched soaps all the time. And I can remember visiting her one time, and she was in the middle of some soap, and she goes, "Oh my God." She says, "All these crazy things that happen to these people. How can all of this be true?" And I said, "You don't get out much, do you?" You know? where, 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 where she's kind of buying into, you know, the craziness that people get themselves involved in. And yet another part of me is going, if you got out more, which is more Jupiterian, you would see that the life out there is even stranger than what you're watching on television.
You know, how many times have you been talking to friends and you're like, you can't make this stuff up? I mean, it's like, but that's what I think is really great because it's
Especially
like,
working in institutions like we have. You've worked, you know, like the homeless shelter. I've worked in schools, and you get exposed to all sides of human nature, you know, and some of it are things that, you know, and I wouldn't even get into it here. There are some of those things, unless you were writing something anonymously and not, you know, that you don't share with others at all. But they also kind of go, "Oh my God, I had no idea that humans did these things."
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like examples, you know, when it comes to the, you know, the homeless, like sometimes I'll get into conversations with people and they'll make these statements, these blanket statements, and I'm just like, you know, and you can't really say anything because, you know, they've made their mind up. But all I can say sometimes is like, that's, you know, that's not really been my experience, but, you know, I can see how you look at it that way. And the same with schooling. You know, I remember my aunt, you know, she was teaching up until I think around 2000 or so. And I think one of the great pains for her was realizing that her teaching had become more about policing and finding out whether there was abuse and neglect going on than there was about actually nurturing the child individually and promoting them along. I mean, there's a lot, you know, it's interesting, you know, with all this, you know, getting back to the quadrant thing, you know, if we think from, you know, Capricorn, Aquarius, um, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, you know, that's like the very end of the zodiac and the very beginning. So it's like these endings and beginnings. And it's like, I think a lot of this is like, you know, we're really going through this major adjustment period on the planet right now. And I'm kind of glad for my 12th house planets because I think it gives us sea legs. It gives us this ability to kind of find our ground even in the midst of really stormy waters, because we've been to these places, we've encountered them. And I think that's part of the reason why we're here doing things like this talk, you know, trying to help bring some awareness, bring some humanity, feeling, you know, that there are ways to make it through. And astrology is such a great tool to help us understand these things in a deeper way that makes more sense, at least for me.
right. When the natural zodiac, these signs are in what we call the Eastern Hemisphere. And the Eastern Hemisphere made up of two quadrants. And the lower one, towards the bottom of the chart, is very personal. And the upper one, the one, you know, above the horizon, so to speak, is is personal as well, but it has to do with one's influence on other people. And so we have, with these energies, we have the collective being influenced by their leaders. And I'm not just talking about, the leaders of their government, the leaders of institutions within their government, that there's this kind of influence coming from those individuals onto the collective. There are people, and who have this area emphasized in their chart, who who if you study their behavior, I know a few, they're constantly trying to influence the people in their social sphere. So this can happen at different levels, but if we're just looking at the world at large, I mean, we're seeing tremendous, we're seeing authoritarianism around the world, and examples of it in places where it's been going on for eons, but it's at the point where individuals, like I was watching the news last night in Myanmar, Burma, that there's these people out in the streets protesting, and I mean it's a mess. But those are the individuals who are trying to, like that Mars energy, expressing their independence and wanting, don't not wanting to be suppressed by this collective energy.
Well, it's interesting because you think about it, because I don't know, you do it a lot with the moon systems, of course. So when you think about it, the last strong relationship that Mars had was when he met up with his grandfather Uranus, right? Which is like the bringer of these ideas and things. And if we think of Taurus as new forms, and I kind of like how you said that, it was like this, like kind of sprinting forward. And I'm not sure if you said that in this or when we were talking before earlier, but it's like, that Mars is the front runner, and that Mars wants to be first. When that Mars gets into Gemini and he's able to like go out there and like be the hummingbird and be the that busy bee, it's going to kind of change all that energy.
Arouse some neighbors.
Right. And then still that, that, and then that moon is heading into Scorpio. So we still then have that little bit of a nice energetic changes going on. I'm like, okay, how do we speak to the painfulness of being alive? How do we speak to and allow for these cycles? I mean, it's very interesting is there are, over 500,000 people have died because of COVID. And we were talking a little bit about beforehand, but then there's also a whole section of other people. I don't know about you, but I know of so many other individuals who've died during this period, completely non-COVID related. So, I mean, this is just a major, I don't know, like I remember back a few years ago, it's like I call it the death train. I think there are just these major periods of time in which groups of people just go, I didn't sign up for this part of it. I'm kind of done. I'm ready to move on and not have to deal with, because it's, they've endured a lot. A lot of them endured the Depression, the 2 world wars, losing family members in the original, not the original, the Spanish flu back in, in the 20s. I mean, people had a relationship with death that's been anesthetized. And here we have this number of deaths happening now. And our relationship with death really still hasn't changed. It's like these random numbers that appear on the screen.
Right. Well, we as humans are all going to die. I mean, this goes to our metaphysical beliefs as well as our spiritual and religious
and
beliefs.
Reality.
And reality. I mean, is there
life is terminal?
Is there a human that's still existing from the days of the first from hundreds of thousands of years ago?
I know of no Methuselahs in this lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that whole kind of thing. And it's interesting too, though, because just from science and, climate change, scientists are telling us, and we're seeing the evidence ourselves, that the climate, at least, where I live and where you live, I mean, the climate certainly has changed. We're approaching spring now, but to take summer, when I first moved here, almost 30 years ago, summer temperatures rarely got into the 90s. There might have been a few days where it hit 90s, mostly in the 80s. Now it's last summer, a lot of days, way more than 10 or 20 years ago.
In the past, a monsoon every day.
And yet we had the
Like
monsoons have
clockwork.
shifted, they have shifted, etc. And one of the things that the scientists are saying is the earth is overpopulated. And I've said this about COVID all along, that Mother Nature is saying, you humans aren't listening, you've got to change the way you're living.
Right.
And so we're upping the evidence that you've got to change. And I don't have an image yet of where that's going. I love my devices, but I've always said that they're a grand experiment and we don't know what they're doing to us totally. Some people claim this and some people claim that. And I'm not denying what they claim, but I said, I just love those things. However, I also know that I won't be surprised if we have to get rid of those things in order to survive on this planet. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case, but I am saying that we have to change the way we live.
There was this interesting series that was done a few years ago, and I only got to see like I think the first 2 seasons of it, but it was called Revolutions. And this scientist had come up with these little electricity eating nanites. And just think about what that would affect on a global way. I mean, basically talk about reverse Prometheus, right? Take the light away from humanity.
Oh my goodness.
And it's really, and it just basically sends us all back into, but I don't like about all these kind of like apocalyptic-y kind of things is like how humans continue to act horribly towards one another. And that's the part like that, to be honest, actually energetically scares me, is like how many people would just automatically think, I've got a gun and therefore I can take from you, or that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, that you're getting into the realm of ethics,
right,
and morality, and yes, and you begin, and it's interesting that those subjects, which used to be requirements in some institutions of education, have been more ones of choice these days.
or the stories that simply our grandparents told us in person that kids no longer are having those experiences. I mean, I was thinking the other day of just how my grandfather, it's interesting, he was born in 1914 with that Pluto, Mars, Saturn combo.
My mother was born the year before, so yeah.
And he was a Libra, so he was like, I love this kind of thing with Libra. We kind of talked about with our last show. It's like, that he's got all that wonderful Libran beauty on the outside, but it's like, scratch the surface and ooh, you would not want to get what it gets. But like the truth is, like, he really taught me so much about what it was to like he was like a mentor for me as a child and instilled the importance of the right ways of doing things. Of course, I think because of what my astrological chart is and because of what my soul was here to learn, I really needed that at a real young age. But he was just like that really guiding, strong, solid male figure in my life that just provided such a ground and an understanding. And I'm sad for how many don't have that, really didn't get to have that kind of a relationship and didn't get to have that kind of mentoring, to be honest.
Yeah, right. Did you go to public schools or Catholic schools?
I went to public schools. I was I really wanted to go to, I would have enjoyed going to Catholic schools, but I think the public school thing, I don't know, like I was kind of fortunate in the sense of like where I grew up in San Jose, there was a thing called the Hawaiian English program that was going on. It was this new way of doing English and teaching language and everything. And so it really helped me in a lot of ways. And then going down into Morgan Hill and growing up there and seeing things from a very different kind of a way of looking at life, I think, kind of there in that southern kind of quiet area of the Bay Area. But there was a lot of there was still shop class going on. There was still, kind of that two-way, where people were like either learning the trades or going to be going to college. And, and there wasn't this there was a little bit of snottiness about it. And my parents are both blue collar. My dad's sheet metal, my mom's hairdresser. But it was like, but the thing is like, that's also the blue collar work, which is what they're starting to understand again now, is where people can really make good money. I mean, 6 figures, because the truth is people need services. People need their electricity worked on. They need their plumbing. They need their HVAC systems. They need their landscaping. And so, I think services are really where it's going to be at. You're either
Yeah,
going to
well,
be.
the basic trades too, the technology may change them somewhat, but there are like tech schools, like our community college has services of that sort where, you can become a present day automotive worker there, because there's a lot of electronics now in automobiles, et
I
cetera.
remember when that was taught in school, that was actually, you could go to auto shop class as part of high school. It would actually, you'd start getting those skill sets so that when you got out of high school, you actually had a usable, what do they call it? Trade knowledge in a sense. I mean, you actually, could go out and start providing. And I don't know that that's incorporated in any way, shape, or form as an understanding of education any longer.
Well, I think those things are there, but they're separated. And I know they were for me where I went, where, they had home ec and sewing classes, but I didn't take those classes. I didn't have to take those classes.
Didn't have to. Did you go to public school or did you go to private?
Oh,
Or
Catholic schools,
Catholic?
Catholic schools. I I went all the way through college, undergrad in Catholic schools, except for a summer school typing class at a local public high school. That
Jesuit,
was the
Jesuit
only,
based or
um,
Jesuit based or general Catholic?
Dominican based.
Sorry.
Well, actually, but college, I went to Holy Names in Oakland,
Okay.
which is now a university. And that's operated by the Holy Names sisters. But it has a very good reputation. They've had Rascob, which is a reading center for teachers there that was really ahead of its time. And also Matthew Fox, who was a Dominican priest, had his spirituality center, feminist spirituality center there. But when he got excommunicated, he left there, and I guess they had a hard time. I don't remember the politics behind. I don't even think I know the politics behind that. I've heard some of it, but not all of it or whatever. Yeah, no. But then I went, to state universities for credentials and UC Berkeley for graduate degree, and yeah. So but I was. But why I was, I guess, asking that was being brought up in Catholic schools. We there were religion classes, but they weren't. They were more. What I recall of them was more basic things about how you live and treat other people.
That's
It
what I thought
wasn't
catechism was all about. I mean, that's what the Bible is, and all of that. It's all socializing, right? I mean, all that stuff is just to socialize us to be thoughtful parts of a larger whole. I mean, hello, here's Aquarius again, right? How do we integrate all these different little parts?
right.
And I wonder, in the sense, you got back, you talked about, our attachment to our electronic devices and stuff. It's like, yeah, like how do we, there's such these dichotomies, our medicine has gotten to the point of making it so we can live longer and live healthier. The vaccine is going to be combating this thing. So, a lot more people can survive, and so here's, where we're these individuals, where we consider humans consider ourselves to be kind of separate from nature. And, so if nature's trying to make these corrections and we keep making things to mitigate that, then I guess she's going to have to continue to kind of ratchet up, right? In a sense. And I mean, and a lot of people say, over the next few years, when you look at the astrology of it all, I mean, it's this is, how do they say that this is the prelude, so to speak, this last year?
Yeah, it will be interesting when Pluto in 23 goes into Aquarius. Yeah, there's going to be another major shift, and that's a couple years from now. That's all.
And it's going to be major for you and I, of course, as it hits our sun, and you've got, 17 other planets in Aquarius too. So it's going to,
17.
I always like making exaggerations to see if anyone's paying attention to how many planets there really are. So Merrylin, I think, I don't know, I think we probably reminisced enough today. What do you think? Anything else you want to add?
No, I think we're fine. It's probably, it's a busy day, and it's always fun to check in with you and what's going on in your mind. And yes, folks, you've often said this, if anybody out there would love to hear about a specific topic related to astrology, email us, call us. Our websites have that information on our contact. I know with YouTube, we say it, you'd have to listen to the whole show to get it, but where can they contact you, Michael?
Michael at cormichael.com at 505-690-3860. This coming Thursday, I'm going to be talking about the Earth in the chart, one of those parts we don't really ever talk about in astrology, on EA Zoom on Facebook. You please check out there. I've got some other things. So if you want to go to upcoming talks on my website at cormichael.com, you can see what's going on. Also doing a healing thing with Sarah Christensen, Astrology for Healing event that's going to be going on for several months with numerous astrologers speaking on healing, and also supporting there are 6 astrologers and 6 organizations that are going to be receiving proceeds from the benefit. And then Stormy Grace is doing this free astrology on YouTube. I'm going to be speaking on the topic of Mercury in the month of in April. And then I'm going to be speaking on the planetary retrograde cycle. So I'm going to be checking in on Aaron Sullivan's book.
Lots of things going on for you of late. Yes. Well, I can be reached at moonwiseastrology.com. My phone number 505-690-1878. And of course, I do Moonwise every week and the Moon Minutes every day. And those are available on ksfr.org, or just go to moonwise.libsyn.com to get those. And so there you go.
Like us, share with your friends, leave comments. We're having fun. We hope you're enjoying watching what we're having to share. So thanks a lot and have a great day.
Bye-bye.